Okay, Chestermere, welcome everyone. I want to honor so much you being here on a Tuesday night at 8 p.m. I know arriving live does not happen accidentally, and many of you are shuffling people and commitments, and even just the March constant desire, maybe to just like be on your couch. I hope you're on your couch still. But as we kind of like emerge from the mud, it doesn't feel like the spark of springtime is active yet for me anyway. So thank you for being here. A few things before we really start, before we really arrive here. If you have been with me before, if you've sat in Zoom circle or real life circle with me before, can you just wave, raise your little Zoom hand if you want. Hi. And if you haven't been here before, can you, oh yeah. Now we're getting all our wires crossed because you guys, I know. Well, if you see anyone new, these are the best people. I know so many of them by now, and you are in such beautiful company. And welcome. If you are new here, I will never make you talk, but your comments and your contributions are so welcome. I really think about it as if we are sitting in circle. And when I was in graduate school, in women's studies, of course, we would talk a lot about how a feminist, which now I understand more as a feminine model of education, means that no voice is more important. So here I'm so honored that I will spend more of the balance of our time talking than probably any of you, but your voice is so welcome as a question or a contribution or witnessing, whatever you need. We also will have pauses where we are going to write maybe, or meditate. My job here is to tell stories and ultimately to guide you into your own stories, whether that is here where our eyes are open and we're discussing, or when we are journeying into our own souls through a meditative or visualization journey. Any questions from anybody? Okay. We are going to start with a quick meditation to center, ground. Before we get there, I want to say, I know I postponed this till today. On Saturday, I was just like, it has to be Tuesday. I just felt that through my whole body. And then when I got home from work, the power was out. So I had saved everything. I've been like mulling this over. I've been like in this so deeply for weeks. And the only thing I had left to do is make this a beautiful slideshow that I was going to make for you, which is weird because I don't make slideshows ever. Real life here, it's not my jam, but that's what was happening for us. And I really felt like the surrender was, no, Christy, you're not a slideshow person, let it go. So here we are, but we will meditate first, and then we are going to go into story and journey with ourselves. So wherever you are, just start to relax, lean back into a comfortable position, whatever that means for you. And use this as a practice in communication with your body. What does it need? What is it asking for? Stillness is not a requirement here. If it wants some gentle movement, if it wants to lie down, it'll be just a few minutes. And notice, just let it show you where you have been holding it in unnecessary effort. Is there a place where you can lean back into alignment, into surrender and trust? And can you let your breath deepen everything? Let it deepen your vision into your body. Let it get darker. Let your awareness wander into places only you know. Can it deepen every cell into a little more stillness, a little more communication, a little more rest? And as this awareness sinks, let everything else just fade away. There's nothing else to be done. For our next hour together, your chief priority is to listen into these spaces, to open up to the communication that arises from your body, from your soul, from your deep, wise knowing. And notice if there's anything bubbling up, arising here now. Are there answers that arrive? Questions? Give yourself permission to do nothing with them. Can you just let them sit without circling for an answer, without circling to place them somewhere? When you're ready, start to bring your awareness back to the room. Remember the physical objects surrounding you. Let your body move and breathe in whatever way it's asking for. And when you're ready, return here and open your eyes. And if there's anything coming up for you already, you are welcome to take a minute and write it down. Before we really begin, if there's anything on your heart that you wanted to share, a question, a realization, or even just where you're at, how you're feeling, feel free to let us know in the chat. Again, no pressure, but if it's on your heart, there's a moment for us to share. Okay. Thank you again for being here. I wanted to rewind a little bit in my personal story where we would have been, slide number 1 would have been. And long ago, let's see, how long ago is that now? Probably just over 2 or 3, it's either 2 or 3 years. I had this vision always of being with women, holding space for women. And my timeline was much different. I felt like I needed to go and do something great, which we'll come back to, in a really masculine, the most masculine sense, to have some validity to be listened to. So that was the journey that I was on. And very fittingly, I think the first post that I ever wrote that was like, I write now, instead of just like, new view, new day, new views, whatever, like that's fine, write your captions however you want to write your captions. But instead of me sharing my life, the first post that I ever wrote for not just myself was about the hero's journey. And it was about how, if you're familiar with The Hero's Journey by Joseph Campbell, he really popularized the theory. He was very specific that it was a hero's journey and that women were like the prize at the end. And they were sometimes like these really angelic guides on the way, or temptresses, like those are your choices. I think most of us here on this call have gone to a place where there's some draw toward like the wicked witch hag figure more than any of the other women that he brings up. But my post then was about how most women I knew had kind of fallen into this pattern of being the helper of a hero's journey. And my point was then of like, hey, what if we just decided we could have hero's journeys too? And I really like stuck to that and stick to that in a way still. But when I came upon the idea of the heroine's journey and how wide and expansive and like inclusive it is, it's all about that process of slaying dragons in a way, and individuation and being a whole person, but also reintegrating so that that comes back to this like overwhelming idea of collective love. And I think the path of love, which was even hard for me to like start talking about and saying, because it sounded so cheesy. Like I just was very sure I was hero's journey till the end. And that if we just focused on that, maybe we could rebalance from all the chick flick content we had taken in our lives and like the Disney princesses. But if we look at it in a different way, that path through in around love can also be part of this heroine's journey, where we come to this whole integrated, powerful being on our own, but that is capable of offering and exchanging transcendent love. So I tend to really fixate on things that I see where I hang out with incredible women all the time. And I have the best job in the world in that mostly I'm just reminding you, like, you're doing great. You're already amazing. And let go of some of the voices that are telling you that you're not. And in the dimension of romantic love and relationships, I feel like all these amazing women that I know, so many of them are living beneath where they could be and what they deserve, because this is where all of our stuff comes up, is in this idea of romantic love. Marianne Woodman, who is a feminist Jungian theorist, feminine Jungian theorist, who I just owe so much of the scaffolding that I get to stand on now from her work. She just talks about how all of our archetypal tendencies, traumas, stuff comes up in romantic love. And by archetypal, she means these big stories, these big energies that are moving through our lives. You know, when you react to something with far more volume than maybe it deserves, and you can feel that that's coming from like a deep wounding place, that all comes up when we are dancing in the realms of love. And so marrying those two ideas together, so we are not stuck in Disney princess or anti-Disney princess, which I was like firmly in the anti-Disney princess camp for a long time. When we look at romantic love through the lens of our own becoming, of our own rise to hold all this incredible capacity that we already have, it can be more empowering and less of a glass slipper story, and more of us rising to widen into our full capacity as women. I have a few more things to say than I normally do today, and I really wanted to start in with a story. And then I'd like to go more into the heroine's journey, etc. I believe deeply that all of us here have an incredible moment to make big changes into the genetic ancestral stories that we come with. And I think women carry maybe even more of that trauma. If you just think about it biologically, I did a whole like senior psych paper on just the evolution of attraction. And if you think about it biologically, like through most of millennia, we need to be like nice and liked and not rock the boat so that we're not like poor kicked on the street, you know? Like even as recent as a couple hundred years ago, you step out of line as a woman, you've got like no money, you've got no job prospects, you're just like a beggar with your bastard child on the street. And so we carry so much of that fear and that desire to make everything nice for everybody. And even at a physical level, our nervous systems have evolved differently. So most of the time, instead of fighting or fleeing, some of us have an even stronger response to freeze and fawn, like make everything okay. And so the decision to act with more intention than even sometimes the instinctual level of our bodies is like so beautiful and such a cool chance that we have. I love, there's a study that Kimberly Johnson cites in her book, Call of the Wild, about women's nervous systems, where she says that there was rats, they like made some sounds, some chimes, and then zapped them. And they had obviously like a pretty big response from the sound thereafter. And then their kid rats, never, no sound, never, no association. But their grandkid rats, they would play the sound and there would still be a body reaction. Their nervous systems would still light up from fear. And so if you think about it, you are carrying the genetic material of women who needed to stay in line to stay alive. whether they were afraid of being burned at the stake or turned out on the street or left for someone like younger, more childbearing, not causing as many problems. So that chance that we have within romantic relationships to actually evolve them into this partnership, into this space where we all say that we want, we are often overriding our biology. And that is where we can make like such widespread changes in the future for future generations, whether they are your actual children or whether they are just people that see you and how you function. Chelsea and I were talking on Instagram, she probably won't mind me saying this, just about how we couldn't think of a single woman growing up that was like the whole thing, that was both powerful and loving. And it's so, in order to move through this, we have to deal with like a lot of our mother stuff and our generational things. And yet also we can move out of that by realizing with compassion that like all this stuff stuck for them too. And this reintegration, when we move through all of it, it gives us compassion behind us instead of just anger. When you think of how many generations of ancestors were maybe shoved in a box or told that they weren't worthwhile. And I think for those of us, sometimes I have found myself in moments jealous of people that had terrible parents, because then you could just like wash your hands of it, you know, like they were awful. And sometimes that choice to evolve can be difficult in a different way when we have great parents, and yet we don't necessarily want to replicate how their marriage worked or whatever. And when I talk about archetypes and these deep patterns that we take in, that we tap into from society, from our unconscious knowing collectively, marriage, relationship is one of those things that we pick up so easily from so many directions. And oftentimes we miss out on the chance to create it intentionally, of what do we actually want. And tonight, probably the last 5 minutes, I'm going to share my longer program. So if you need to leave before then, it's okay, but I just want to share that invitation. But it was spurred from the fact that we have this thing that impacts whether you are inside or outside relationship. Most of us are like spending some bandwidth on the person that we're with, or the person we'd like to be with, or that we're with no one. And so much of that is happening unconsciously. And using that as fuel, as evolutionary steps in our heroine's journey can be so much more empowering, useful, and actually end up with the intentional creation that we actually want, instead of just falling into what happens or repeating our own cycles or cycles that have come before us. So the story that I actually wanted to start with is, I've never talked about it publicly, but it was one of the deepest experiences of my whole life. And it was about 1.5 years ago. I was doing a whole thing. I am like, have 3 hours that I'm dropping in. So I'm doing like breath work and meditation, and I'm on a like visualization journey. And I had very high hopes of finding like an inspiring ancestor. Like, I have been back through my family tree a few times, and like I can hit on some, there's like the Macbeth royalty in there, there's like an Irish princess. And my whole intention was to like make this empowering like connection. And I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I was like, I'm finding like, there are angels helping me here, and I'm going to like find out. So I am deep in the whole thing, and I am very like surrendered and open to where this is going. And there's a family history app on my phone. I open it and I'm like, oh no, I know where this goes. And it doesn't go to the Irish princess, all right? It's going to like a sad lady that lived on a farm. No, thank you. And I ended up on my great grandmother's like profile, and there was her personal history attached. I was like, okay. And I started reading it, and in her first paragraph, she just talked about how she was so drawn to writing and the arts and like performing, and she had this whole big life plan for herself. And she wanted to be the first person in her family to go to university, but they didn't have the money. And this guy that she'd been seeing, he offered to pay for her to go. And she decided that wasn't fair. So she stayed home and married him. And then there was just pages and pages. I think it took me like 45 minutes to read about deep hardship in her life, of like going bankrupt several times over and living on a farm during the Depression, and her husband like having a heart attack on a tractor at 55, and she has like nervous breakdowns, and she has to go live with her kids. And sorry, the message there was that I get to take those talents and heal that story. And there was so much of it that like resonated on such a deep body level for me. So many things that I had like lived with that I was like, I feel like that lives in me, but I don't have like a story. Like I wasn't like 5 and all these things happened. But it lived in my body. And it also made sense that I had so much about like this deep fear that if I was in like, if I got trapped in a relationship, I could never do my life. And that was like the story that I had carried for such a long time. And before then, the story that I carried, which you might resonate with, was like, I think that, if I'd like to say so myself, I was a very accomplished person till my late to mid 20s. And I would say that 80% of that was because if I like did enough things, I would be lovable. Okay. Like some guy was going to love me and prove that I was like fine if I did enough things. And it was actually like a hallmark point in my life when my little brother was like, Chrissy, nobody cares about that. I just want to be with a girl that like I like hanging out with, I'm attracted to. And I was like, what a racket. I've been doing all of this for nothing. Anyway, so we're going to talk about these stages a little bit later, but you probably have stories that live in your body, whether that is your own. I have plenty of my own, you know, like someone made an offhanded comment when you're 10 or 15 or 22, and it still lives. And we can repeat and compensate for those, or we can use them as our evolution. Chelsea, go.
Just gonna add a second experience. So I wanted to go find my Vikings. Like I wanted to go find the warriors, like in my family history.
Mm-hmm.
And my sad Sad women that lived on farms showed up too. And I have felt them sit in circle with us in these kinds of calls. The things and the ideas and the things that they didn't have access to heal, I believe that they're joining us and doing it now alongside us.
Yeah, I was almost, yeah. This is my picture that stays on my altar, comes with me. So, when we think of our journey as with the possibility, like we have so much possibility now, and it also gives us some permission to like let go of some of the self-blame. You are repeating millennia, generations. If you're like, I still keep having this fight with my husband that I married when I was 20, I don't know, like, you're fine, we're fine. Marion Woodman again, she said, it's impossible for you to make an evolved choice of a partner when you are 20. She literally, I heard her say that the other day. I mean, she's dead, but I was listening to her. And so you get to like give yourself a break. And you might be doing the work of creating something right now, and you might be doing the work of recreating something that already exists, or seeing if it can be recreated, or even just polishing, refining something that is already good, that is already fine. And whatever it is, we're going to frame it in terms of our own journey. I don't even know if this makes sense, but I say it a lot. So like crossing my fingers, is that I am here to help you in your relationships. A lot of my private clients were working in relationships or even in other programs that are not this, but I don't care about your relationships. But I do, because they're yours, but I care about how and who you can be in them. And that's what transforms them. Okay. Okay, we're going to my first of two slides. So this is the work of Maureen Murdoch. And if you're familiar with the hero's journey, a lot of the times they don't got no parents, they're piecing out, you know, they had like the call and the refusal of the call, and they have the road of trials. But I think that the ends, like the hero's journey, involves them coming back and sharing, which I think is a very beautiful way to look at the masculine. I dance in the energetics of the masculine and feminine is how I see the world. I don't want you to think of those as gendered terms, because we have both of them, and our agility to move between them and use both of them is like the whole thing. But most of the time it's like being right-handed or left-handed. We have some dominant, a dominant one. And you probably have different categories in yourself, which when you understand that can make partnerships and looking for partners so much easier. That changed my life. Okay. And anyway, so the masculine has to come back in the hero's journey, but this conclusion, the integration of the masculine and feminine for the heroine's journey, is so beautiful, because that is the work that we're doing. So begin, she has it in a cycle, because that's what we do here. The feminine is all about the cycles and the spiral. And so you will probably have an overarching theme of this through your life, but you also may go through several as you spiral and deepen. So it begins with the separation. Oh, it just says it can now. Can you guys see that? Okay, sorry. Just had a weird notification, Zoom thing come up. So it begins with the separation from the feminine. I actually want to see, I can't see. How many of you were father's daughters? That's Maureen Murdoch's term. It's fine if you weren't. I was the hardcorest father's daughter I believe that has ever lived on the earth. So my separation from the feminine was like real hard. I like bolted out of there. How you get respect in the world is because you can be logical and you can be driven and feelings are dumb and you achieve stuff. So there's me and my hero's journey. All of my currency was that I could blend in the world of the masculine. That was really like all I cared about, was that I could be like, I knew everything that was happening on ESPN. You ask me now, have I watched a basketball game on my own accord? No, because I only did it so that like it was currency. I don't care. And we have this road of trials. So we similarly are going through our things, whatever that is. You all have gotten to this point here somehow. And this, we're going to come back. I want to frame this a little bit, add a framework onto this as well. So you might not feel this exactly, but don't worry, we're coming back. So I meet most women here at the bottom of this circle, awakening to feelings of spiritual aridity and death. So it might not be death, but it feels crazy. Anyone here identified with that? You've been in a place where you're like, I did all the things. And that might be like, I got married and I had a bunch of kids and I thought that was like the thing. I thought that was like the end point. And now what does it mean? What am I doing? Or maybe like me, there I was like, you're saying that no one is going to fall in love with me because I have a master's degree. What the hell did I spend my money for then? We come to this point where we're like, what was it all for? And it doesn't mean it's a waste. That is the thing that I want to emphasize here. Wherever you have been through, it doesn't mean it was a mistake. Everybody is going through it. Nobody pitches a perfect game here. Nobody skips the whole thing. You don't get to do it in reverse where you're like, take 2 steps out and you're like, oh, you're right. My mom had a hard time too. And the feminine's where it's at. And like, I love everyone. You don't get to. So whatever you have gone through, if you recognize missteps here, great, awesome. And especially resonant is at the bottom, the initiation and descent to the goddess. So we come here where we're like this framework of patriarchy, not necessarily like the masculine, but that stuff that keeps us overproducing and looking outside of ourselves for validation and that we're doing a fine job, that says our house is never clean enough, or we can't run very far and we're not in very good shape and probably we need some more Botox and like whatever that is. We start to realize that maybe it's not like how we want to spend our 80 to 100 years. And we start to look deeper. The path of the feminine is imminence. It's like deep in our body. And as women, it's so exciting because our rites of passage are very embodied. Like we get periods and we have babies and we're menopausal, and that like all that information comes through us through our body, and that's so beautiful. And our body is like the most important tool when we learn to work with it in this framework, and especially the next one that I want to talk about. It gives us all the information. It changes when we learn that communication and to identify what it's telling us. It changes how we interact with everybody. Then we have this yearning to reconnect. You guys, I see some of your faces and I know that you were like better than this, but I was for sure like, I'm not like other girls. I don't like have girlfriends that like get away along. Like, doesn't that sound stupid? And here, then we start to come back. And we get to start to heal the mother-daughter split. We get to look at, because it's not just our mother, it's also our archetypal mother, that none of us, if you are here now, you did not get the like strong, wide, like expansive, but powerful mothering, because it doesn't exist here. We haven't seen it, we haven't felt it. And so we get to start to heal that with our own generations, with our own ancestry, but also in the world. And we start to become it. And we get to heal the wounded masculine. And I take some teachings from Neo-Tantra. It's like really, it's kind of like this, it's real popular right now, but it talks about like the essential qualities to the masculine and the feminine. And I think there is some beautiful usefulness to it. But the one thing that I can't get behind is that it talks about the feminine needs to like follow, and the masculine is the initiating energy. And that doesn't feel true in my body. Every woman that I know is breaking new ground. And when we look at it this way, just not that we are here to like overpower everything. We're not like wearing 80s, 90s power suits, being like, look, we can do it all. No problem. I got it. Where's Xanax? Like, we're not doing that, but we get to go first. And we get to go first in relationships. We get to go first in the world, as using that combination, that beautiful marriage of like a power and love to make really significant, loving change to the world. And when we get to the integration of our masculine, yes, we get to go first. And we're going to talk, Ashley said she's also crying. Thank you. We're going to talk a little bit about like what that can feel like in a second. But when we look at it this way, it takes so much courage to go first, because our biology tells us to like hang back a little bit and like see how we need to adjust so nobody gets upset. And so having the courage to re-navigate, to reimagine our relationships and how they could be, it's kind of like, I saw a coach, anyway, that's not relevant, but that courage to go first feels like, you can imagine this scenario, okay, where you're like, you're in a thing, you like really like someone, you like maybe love someone. That courage to stand there and just be like, I love you, without expectation, without the clench, without the need, like that kind of initiation energy, where you can be totally raw, vulnerable, and still be like, I'm gonna be okay. That is where we are learning to hold ourselves. Okay, I was gonna make you, I might still have to make it, like my part of me that loves PDFs kind of got activated. I didn't have enough time to do it with my dead computer and dead phone and no power. This is what we got today. So one really helpful taking from a Neo-Tantra teacher, David Data, he talks about 3 stages of communication, which I think it sounds super dry, but stay with me. And the first one, he says, is coming from our woundedness. So the part of Christy that was like, please love me so that I can be shown that I'm okay. And the part of me that was like, I am good. If you know me now, let me paint a picture for you. 22 or 23-year-old Christy, in a serious relationship. I stopped riding I was competing really seriously, barrel racing. I stopped riding my horses so that I could take supper to my boyfriend every day at 6 because he was studying. Like, could he get his own supper? No, because that is like where my goodness lies. I deferred my master's degree. Like, it is hard for me to imagine. I'm so glad I got to live so much distance in between those 2 points. And it's not to say I'm going to come back to the making supper, okay? That's not the problem. Not the problem at all. The problem is that everything I was doing was leaking out energy from my base. So when we're in our first stage, we are like in rubble. If you imagine a tower with all these holes knocked into it at the bottom, it is not stable. And when we haven't shored up the whole thing, then we are doing like we need, and or we flee, like whatever it is, when it's coming from that really like wounded place of needing validation or stability or like adoration. That was a wound I figured it out that I still had, that I didn't know about. But that's not actually like partnership and love and like deep knowing. I wanted that distance of like, think I'm amazing, but like just stay down there a little bit, like look up at me, okay? That closing the distance takes a lot of courage. So his first stage, and that's where we get like the yelling fights and the triggers when we're in our first stage. And I know this, I have lived this to my bone. I am not saying that I know about having 5 kids or being married for 20 years, but this in my body, I know, or else I wouldn't teach you about it. So we can still, no matter where we are, how much work we've done, we can still feel ourselves slipping down into that first stage where like, and it feels in our body, or we're kind of like, it's leaking out. Our structure isn't stable. And that's really reflective of this first part of Maureen Murdoch's journey, where we're in this split. The second stage of David Data's work is in second stage communication. It's where so many, which is useful, okay? We don't get to skip. It's where we have a lot of like relationship therapists and content where we're talking about boundaries, and we know how to have like a non-violent conversation where we're like, the story that I'm making up about what you did, I'm saying this in like kind of an annoying voice, but we need these, okay? How I'm experiencing this is I'm curious about why you did this, where we're like tight, but we're in this real structure. And it's like this part of us where we learn to keep our masculine together. We're learning how to individuate, how to be on our own, a separate person with another person that is having another experience. It also changes how we date so much, because all of our stuff gets so activated because someone's literally not picking us. It's the friggin' worst. And when we can move into the second stage, we can also see it as like, oh, this isn't an evaluation. Christy, do you like everybody? No, barely any. When I got Aiden's on here, so I just want her to attest to this because she was my friend that got to hear about so many Christy dating things. The second stage Christy, which I lived in for a friggin' long time. And this was always my whining thing. I just don't have like feelings like regular people. I just have like robot feelings. I don't know. I just don't think I'm like capable of like feelings and like love, like people say. It's just like not my deal. Aiden, can you just nod that that's true? Okay, thank you. But also it was part of the stuff of like realizing that like, oh, do you like that person? No. So does it matter if he doesn't call you back? No, also no. Live your life. And this might be a place where still needs some work. If you've been through Soul with me, we are mostly working on like our second stage tower, getting rid, like patching up all those wounds. Like, what did you take from your mom? What did you take from where you haven't forgiven this person here? And we are like making our structure really sound. But then it felt like there was this whole realm that nobody had ever told me about. And I think it feels like my deep mission right now to talk about. And this is stage 3. And David Data teaches it in this really like neo-tantric, like sexual way, but it applies so much wider. And I love layering it atop of Maureen Murdoch's Heroine's Journey, because it is, to me, that third stage is the blooming, where our structure is sound. So then what are we going to do with it? And it feels like, it looks like to me, this lush flowering garden atop the tower, where we know everything underneath there is pretty good. So then we get to dance in this space of love from overflow and joy. Marion Woodman said, it takes so much work to love another person at just a human level, which was so disappointing to me, because I am like a Enneagram 4 deep epic like journeyer. So like the goal here is to love someone at a human level. Are you freaking kidding me? I want like poetry, like write a freaking song about me, okay? But when we start to remove our woundedness, when we start to remove how these archetypes, how we see what we didn't get through another person, how we're craving what we needed earlier from another person, then we get to love them as a human. And you can even play in this stage, whether you have been married for 20 years or whether you are on a first date, this energy still applies. And this bloom, this third stage, is also where we can dance in actually changing the world. This is the energy that we come to circle with each other. It is remarkable. I know a lot of us, like maybe we're still carrying some sister wound stuff, but for the most part, the women that I sit with have so much love to offer each other. And that is in this third stage, where like, I'm no longer thinking about like, is she judging me? Does she think my hair is really ugly? Where we can sit in like presence and actually respond to the moment and live in this like lush garden that is growing atop this strong structure that we have built. And so when we are in our third stage, we can make the dinner as an offering of like love and devotion. And we don't need anything, because it's such a subtle line. And for me, it's all about that communication with our body. So in Bloom, we're like doing that about what it feels like, because I can feel if I'm making dinner so that I am like validated, appreciated, like those subtle manipulations, or if I'm making dinner as like this offering of love. Those are such different things. And when we learn how to move through all of them and then integrate, like Maureen Murdoch's last stage is that integration of the masculine, feminine. When we layer that paradigm atop it, where we can recognize where another person is at and respond to the moment. So for like all of history, women have been responsive in the sense of like, what do I need to morph into so that I am safe and like nobody's mad? And we get smaller. But when we move through these stages personally, when we move in that spiralic growth pattern personally, then we can respond to the moment in like power and strength, where we see that there is someone suffering or someone that needs us. When we see that someone we love needs us to hold space, then we can dance between them. And when we expand the archetypes that we can hold in our body, when we learn how to move from this like devotional space or into playful, when we can even channel our anger through this third stage. So the point is here is it gives us even more freedom when we learn how to move in this realm, because then we aren't just limited to these really dry, resonant, like business conversations, which sometimes we need. We're like, you didn't pick this up after work for me and it made me feel really hurt, like I didn't matter. Yeah, sometimes we're having those, but sometimes we can use all that feeling, move it up through, keep the moment inflated, and like deepen that moment even further. Because as women, we have such a wide range of energy that we can embody. For me, I could play one note and it was like smart, logical girl. And I had all these hopes, like those secret hopes where you're like, oh, maybe I could be like this, but like, it'd be so embarrassing. When we go first, then we learn how to hold ourselves, that we know we're fine, and we can start to widen the space that we can take up, not in a selfish way in the world, but we increase our energetic agility of who we can be when, and we can rise to the level of heroine. I love that third stage isn't weak. Yes. Yes, no, it's not. And it also is so powerful because then we don't leave our post. So sometimes, who remembers, like, did anyone else's mom like get into martyr house cleaning mode? That is my go-to when I'm mad. I will like martyr clean the house. And did anyone ever wish, or like martyr, I will cook the dinner, you ungrateful little wretches? And did anyone wish that their mom could just be happy instead? Like, mom, let's eat frozen pizza and like be nice. And we learn in our bodies, like, okay, we're gonna do that sometimes, but how to not leave our post of like, to do this for you will require, like, I can't do it in a way that doesn't take me down to first stage. So like, it's fine, we're just gonna leave it. And like, you can eat a frozen burger and like, okay. One more thing that I wanted to really touch on too, is that our personal resourcedness is so imperative to monitor into this. So it might not be another person. If you are overstretched, burnt out, don't have enough time for all of that, it is so hard to like keep your tower together. And sometimes that can be a beautiful, expansive, energetic practice of, I am so like tired and stretched, but I'm going to like pull that together so I can third stage offer something, but we can't do that long term. And so part of the thing that we're doing in Bloom too is, how do we have some of those second stage conversations if we're in partnership? We're going in 2 groups. So it's like partnered, single, you have access to all the content, but there's a few ways that we're going to really like sink into those. So it's like, how do we have some of those second stage conversations of redistributing work or even eliminating some of it, so that we can both be in this place where we're more resourced and we can dance in that third stage together. Because when we lose, like, if you are always wondering if you're going to have enough money to pay for groceries, it is very hard to stay in that third stage. So that's not a judgment, but we are going to look at that as like a piece. And I just wanted to acknowledge that if you are sitting here already being like, I want to be up there, but I'm just so tired and I don't know, like, yeah, we're going to talk about that. And that is so valid. Okay. So when we learn what all of these feel like in our body, and then we can also make choices and realize that we are also a main character here. So if you're looking at yourself as a heroine and not just like a helper, then it's important that everything stays solid for you too, because you have this love in whatever size and volume it is, whether that is just with your children, just in your home, or like on a bigger scale. How you move through the world, that bloom in yourself, is so tangible to so many people. Chelsea, go.
Sorry, Christy.
No, not sorry.
Okay. The heroine's journey just changed everything for me, because like you explained, like I was living the masculine, the hero's journey, but that taps out so early. Like when you look at the heroine's journey, it's like you identify with the masculine, you think you're rocking it. Like that's as far as you get. Yes. And that is split from the feminine the whole time. So you're never like, but then I just noticed that the thing that we're avoiding, like what you said about the biology, that we want to stay alive. And the thing that we're avoiding, that we're worried of, is this death, this like the spiritual descent into like the death. And so there's everything in us that's trying to like keep things, working, succeeding. Oh, my light's gonna turn off. Oh my goodness. I'm just, okay, there we go. And with the hero's journey, I feel like all we ever get to at the end is like a pretty immature boy with a pretty immature girl with all the wounds, but thank goodness we found each other so we can live miserably in the castle. Like, and there isn't the support to work past it, but the feminine journey, whoever it is you're journeying with, whether that's your own masculine side and your feminine side that you're trying to integrate, or with a partner, like you're spiraling again and again and again, and you're rediscovering and recreating who you are entirely over and over and over again. And that just like, it's so much more alive to me. It's so much more helpful. Like what you post on Instagram about like the multiple relationships. Like I said that to my husband, he was like kind of at first, and he's like, oh no, I get it. And I'm like, yeah. And like, we realized, like, I was like, I've moved through the archetypes and he's come along for the ride. Like we are growing instead of just trying to like support this illusion of success that only has one framework of this masculine way. It changes everything.
Exactly. And I believe so deeply that like this whole journey is the journey of our soul, and that death is terrifying. I had a small moment of this. It was Aiden there? No, not yet. She came like she was maybe there. No, I think she came 2 days later. There was a moment where I'm in my masculine, like boon of success. I'm like doing big things. And I had a big deal. I took a lot of the blonde out of my hair, which sounds so stupid. But that blonde was supposed to make me like more marketable and like tone down all the Christy, like, oh, but she's like fun and like not that smart. And I was like, the blonde is a cover up. I took out a bunch of the blonde out of my hair, and I was going to do this big, terrifying like pitch thing for my tech company. Like I'm in the most masculine place, all the masculine layers in one. And like when I realized why I was actually I was like, I have taken a wrong turn, but I wasn't. I was just on this circle. Anyway, the night before, I am melting down, bawling. And for me, it felt like I'm going to step into this and no one will ever love me. Like this is the point of no return, that I go too far. And that I will step too far out of this woundedness, whatever that is. And love is no longer available for me if I do this thing tomorrow. And for me, that felt like a death. It really did. It felt like a death of this maidenhood that I felt like could be loved. And those tiny deaths or big deaths where we have this scary conversation, or we renegotiate everything about what our current relationship looks like, or we say like no more to this exact same person that I keep dating that isn't the same person, but it is. Like those deaths is where we choose ourselves as the heroine. That's where we find the main character energy, where we step into the darkness. And the path of the feminine is always requires us to go into the hazy unknown, into the depths of ourself. And it's not clear. And especially for women, we have very few imprints of how to do it. The only one that I ever really get to, because we never have this all modeled together, this integration, this endpoint. We only see the girl in the tower who probably starts fighting on day 2 about who's going to do the dishes. Sometimes I'm like Wonder Woman, that's the closest we got. Like she's strong and tough and in love. And also she like, it's so interesting what we become available for. I was talking with someone who said like, oh, boys just treat me really bad. Like she's about my age, been dating, man, I dated for a real long time. And she's like, boys just treat me really bad. Why does that happen to you? And I just realized like, I am so unavailable for anything in that realm. And whatever we're in, when we change how we are dancing, then the response to our dancing changes. Like when we can hold our energy differently, it changes everything. So if you are already in partnership, I care about that, but I don't. I care about who you can become by using this as practice, by demanding of yourself to spend more of the time looking at your life as this grand arc. And that might look like saying no to some of those masculine pursuits that you feel like you should do. Like maybe it's not that important that your house is like perfectly decorated, but you feel like you should. Or maybe you are so lit up by that idea, but your husband can go to fly with his buddies to go to basketball games, but you can't have any money to like repaint your walls. Like those are the same thing, but from different angles. And they can both be on your heroine's journey. Saying no, saying yes, whatever it is. I don't know what it is, but you do. You do. And those moments of death where we step in, where we meet the goddess inside, outside ourselves, where we step into the unknown, that's where we really get into the exciting stuff. And we start to really strengthen and bolster our towers. And atop that tower, we build something beautiful and lush. And we can dance in that partnership. Every woman that I ever talk to, you want to feel supported and equal. And we always want to do that in a way that like doesn't stress us out. But it's just not how the story is going to go. And it might for your granddaughters, but right now it won't. So you get to go first. You get to be this raging river of divinity of all that you are, and learn how to use that in a way that brings more love to the moment, to the relationship, to the date, to the world, whatever it is. Okay. So that's it. In our last 3 minutes together. Absolutely. Someone just asked about the recording. I will post it. I will send it to everybody. Yes. In our last 3 minutes together, I wanted to give you a real quick bonus. There are some of you on this call that are already in. Freaking just wicked. I'm so pumped. There is a fast action bonus if you would like to join us in Bloom. It's going to be 4 months. We are doing this. You will know this heroine's journey. You will know these stages in your body. We are going to talk about embodying more of the archetypes, of figuring out like where those holes in your tower came from, how to patch them up, and practice. We are going to practice holding that energy. There is a reason I dug deep into this a year and 3/4 ago for my clients, and then I got to really practice it. And there's a reason that it has taken me this long to bring it forth, and it is because we get to learn it in our bodies and what that feels like. So I'm going to post, there's $100 off if you are on the call. It's only active for tonight, so I'm going to post those links in here. But the other things that I wanted to add is we're going to do the draw tomorrow because Amelia, one of my assistants, has all the spreadsheet. We're going to put you in for that. But also because of the recording, if there's anybody that you think would benefit from our circle today, if you could send this or share parts of it, what was meaningful to you with the world, with your friends on the phone. It doesn't have to be in a showy Instagram way, but I feel so tied that my heroine's journey is so intertwined with helping other women see theirs and feel theirs and expand the capacity of what our lives can feel like. And I don't think this was modeled for any of us, but we can go first. And so if you would like to sink into that container, have me midwife you through it, help you, sit with you, witness you, and also direct and coach you through it. We will be together. We are starting next week. So anything else before we go? Does anybody have any questions or comments on our class tonight? We were way more talky and way less writey and meditatey than we usually are, but goddess, man. Oh, yes, yes, because it's not just your first, it's not just your 15-year marriage. It is thousands of years of women in marriages. So if it feels scary, yes, you are not alone. You are not alone. And this is where our deepest stuff comes up. And when we get it all straight, then we just get to love in a human way. I remember probably a year and a half ago, I was reading something and they said, ideally in a relationship, we get to spend as much time enjoying each other as possible. And I was like, enjoying each other? Like, that's so undramatic and impossible sounding too. Like, but that dance, that magic can happen even moments when we're mad, surprised. Yes, great. Thank you, JJ. Okay. I am just going to grab that discount link if you want it. If you're already in Homefires Collective, you need a different one. There we go. So we are going to draw tomorrow. If you had any big takeaways, I would love to hear them, even if you just message them to me. Thank you so much for sitting in such a powerful circle. I can feel you. I could feel you all night. Thank you for dropping in. And if we are complete here, if you want to unmute yourself and just say goodbye out into our space with real voices, and I will see you soon.
Thank you, Christy.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
I love you.